All right, we are going to start chapter 28. We are all here now. Just to remember, in chapter 27, finally the tube was taken out of her throat so she can now talk. She learned that she had been on a private jet that had flown her to England from Pakistan, and she had two doctors, that Dr. Javid and Dr. Fiona, were with her this whole time for like 2 weeks, and she was in a coma for one of those weeks, which means she had no idea even what was going on. So here she had taken that big flight, and she didn't even know, and her parents had just given them Malala to care for. So it's kind of a crazy situation. Chapter 28, we are all here now. When the tube in my throat was removed, I had had another call with my father, one where I could actually speak. He said he would be by my side in 2 days, but 2 days turned into 2 more. Dr. Javid arranged a third call to Pakistan. My father promised that the whole family would be there soon, just 1 more day. Please bring my school bag, I begged. Exams are coming up. I thought I'd be home in no time and would go back to competing for first in class. The next day, my 10th day in the hospital, I was moved from the ICU to another room. This one had a window. I had expected Birmingham to look like cities I'd seen on television, like New York City, with tall buildings and cars and traffic and men dressed in business suits on the street and women walking down the street as well. But when I looked out, all I saw was a sky the color of an old tea kettle, rainy and gray. Down below were houses, neat and uniform, calm and organized. I couldn't imagine a country where every house was the same, a country where there seemed to be no sun. Where were the mountains, the waterfalls? Later that day, Dr. Javid told me my parents were coming. I didn't believe it until he tilted my bed up so I would be sitting to greet them when they arrived. It had been 16 days since I'd run out of my house in Mignora, shouting goodbye on my way to school. In that time, I had been in 4 hospitals, first in Mignora, then in Peshawar, then in Rawalpindi, and finally here in Birmingham, and traveled thousands of miles. I had met wonderful doctors and nurses and other hospital workers. I had not cried once, not when the nurses removed the staples in my head, not when their needles pricked my skin, not when the light was like a dagger in my eyes. But when the door opened and I heard familiar voices saying, "Johnny," and "Pisho," and when everyone fell upon me weeping and kissing my hands because they were too afraid to touch me, finally I cried. I cried and cried and cried some more. Oh, how I cried. And for the first time in my life, I was even happy to see those annoying little brothers of mine. Finally, after 16 of the most frightening days of our lives, we were all together again. After we all stopped crying, we took a minute to have a good look at one another. I was shocked at how old and tired my poor parents looked. They were exhausted from the long flight from Pakistan, but that wasn't all. Suddenly, I saw that they had some gray hairs and wrinkles. Had they always had them, or had this ordeal aged them somehow? I could tell they were shocked by how I looked too. They tried to hide it, but I could see the concern in their eyes. They touched me cautiously, as if I might break. And who could blame them? I knew from looking in the mirror that half of my face was not working. The swelling had gone down, but my left eye bulged, half my hair was gone, and my mouth drooped to one side. Meanwhile, I had been so pleased to have my voice back that I hadn't realized I was still able to speak only in simple baby sentences, as if I were 3 years old. It wasn't until I saw the surprised expression on Atal's face that I realized how strange I must have sounded. I tried to smile to reassure them. "Don't worry," I wanted to say. "The old Malala is still in here." But when I smiled, a shadow darkened my mother's face. I thought I was grinning, but my parents saw something that looked like an awkward, crooked frown. "Abba." "Who were those people?" I asked. He understood what I was asking. I wanted to know from him who had done this to me. "Johnny, don't ask those questions. Everything is fine. We're all here now." And then he asked me how I was feeling, if the headaches had gone away. I knew he was trying to change the subject, and although I wanted him to answer my question, I let him. My father, my proud, passionate father, was not himself. It was almost as if he had been shot as well. He seemed to be in physical pain. When we were alone one day, he grasped my hand. "Johnny," he said, "I would take every scar you have, every minute of suffering if I could." His eyes were filled with tears. "They threatened me many times. You have taken my bullet. It should have been me." And then he said, "People experience both joy and suffering in their lives. Now you have had all the suffering at once, and the rest of your life will be filled with only joy." He could not go on. But he didn't need to say another word. I knew he was suffering too. He had never doubted the rightness of our cause, but that cause had taken his daughter to the brink of death. How unjust the world can be sometimes. Here I was, a girl who had spoken to cameras from around the world, but my poor injured brain couldn't come up with the words from the one person I loved more than anyone else. "I'm not suffering, Abba," I longed to tell him. "You need not suffer either." I smiled my crooked smile and simply said, "Abba." My father smiled back through teary eyes. I knew that he knew exactly what I was thinking. We didn't need words. We had shared every step of the journey that had somehow brought us to this hospital room, and we would share every step going forward. A little while later, my mother joined us. I had started taking small steps, but I still needed someone to help me in the bathroom. Since that first day, my mother had tried not to stare at my face. But as she guided me into the bathroom, I noticed she stole a look at my reflection in the mirror. Our eyes met for a moment, and then she looked away. Then came a whisper. "Your face," she said. "Will it get better?" I told her that what the doctors had told me. I would have to undergo several surgeries and months of physical therapy, but my face would eventually improve. But it would never be quite the same as before. When she walked me back to my bed, I looked at my parents. "It's my face," I said, "and I accept it. Now," I said gently, "you must accept it too." There was so much more I wanted to say to them. I had had time to get used to my new face, but it was a shock to them. I wanted them to know I didn't care how I looked. Me, who had spent hours fussing with my hair and fretting about my height. When you see death, I wanted to say, things change. It didn't matter if I couldn't blink or smile. It was still me, Malala. "My face. It doesn't get better," I said. "God has given me a new life." My recovery was a blessing, a gift from God, and from all the people who cared for me and prayed for me, and I was at peace. But while I was in Birmingham, watching Shrek and his talking donkey, my poor parents had been thousands of miles away, enduring their own terrible pain. I had been healing while they had been suffering. From that day on, our family began to heal together. And that is the end of chapter 28.